the empowerment of organizations to know and to understand that neurodiversity isn't a scary word. It's okay to be different, and the more we create psychological safety in our organizations, the easier it's going to be to support our staff. So I think it is changing, and I think the next evolution of this understanding of neurodiversity comes with the power of organizations understanding it to create those supportive systems for people. I was diagnosed with ADHD a couple of years ago. So for me, the diagnosis process was, it was, I don't know whether it was stressful, but it was kind of confusing. And throughout that process, I wanted to be in a position where I could help other people through the same process, for it to be, one, less stressful, but two, for organizations to realize that being neurodiverse is not a scary thing, that there are 1 in 7 people that are neurodiverse globally. So it means that we already exist in this world. So what I wanted to do was take the best practices that I've learned in an agile world, so from building technology into figuring myself out and also helping other people do a similar sort of thing. It's helped me to learn a language in a year. So I've been learning Serbian for the last 2 years, whereas I always get told it's impossible to learn a language with ADHD. Newsflash, it is not. I believe I can do anything I can set my mind to. And that is one of the things I've hyper-focused on for 2 years. So it is possible. And yeah.
I think, thank you so much for sharing that. And again, thank you for your time today. I just want to touch on the learning language thing, because it's interesting, isn't it? Because when we think of, if I took for myself, say, having dyslexia and ADHD, if I was to mention, I want to learn a language, they would say, well, don't you just struggle with your native language, then alone trying to learn a different language? What was that kind of a process for you to go through, wanting to learn another language, and what did that kind of look like for you?
Yeah, it's for me, it's the way I've approached learning lots of different things, actually. I think there needs to be a vision, like there needs to be a reason for doing it. I did it for love. So my husband's Serbian. So having a real reason to do something. So from a language point of view, for me, it was really, really important that I could speak to my husband's family. So his parents don't speak English. And so I've felt absolutely engulfed in love in this family. And I wanted to make sure that I could communicate back with them. So for me, having a reason for doing something is really important. Also, I started with all of the tools. I had all of the gear and no idea. So I was reading books. I was, watching videos, got a teacher, lots of different things, because I wanted to try lots of different things really quickly to figure out which one would work for me. So I speak to a teacher once a week. I've done immersive language school. So I spent the summer in Montenegro, learning, not the whole summer, I spent like 3 weeks there. With purely Serbian speakers and also Serbian language learners. So immersing myself in the thing that I wanted to do and learn was really helpful. So finding the tools that fit you, because language learning, especially if you learn it from a book, for me was really difficult because it's so structured. It's you learn this and then you learn this and then you learn this. And I think, well, I want to learn this thing over here and then I want to learn this thing over here. So being able to go, actually, I don't have to follow the book in exactly the same way it was written, because nobody's telling me that I can and can't read the book in the way I choose.
Yeah. And I think that's really prevalent, isn't it? That there are different ways. If we came on to kind of technology, there's so many different things that suit individuals in certain ways. When I guess if I was to think about, I'm 47 now, that, back in the day when I was thinking about learning languages, it would be a case of, it would probably just be textbook and then it'd probably be tape, to listen back. But there's loads of ways now to be able to formulate. Did you think, with your kind of technology background, did you think of implementing a more tech way of doing it? Or was it just a way that just felt that you could decode the information a lot easier?
I think technology helped me at the beginning. So there's an app called Ling, which is similar to Duolingo. if Duolingo are listening, Serbian's a really great language for people to learn if they want to learn other Slavic-based languages. Anyway, top tip. So I used an app, and it's really similar to Duolingo. So you have like sentence structures, and you can do bits and bobs. And also the internet helped me learn the language, because also helped me find a teacher. So I use a website called italki, and it's open. You have community teachers, professional teachers. So if you want to chat with somebody, if you want a teacher, more structured teacher, again, it goes back to finding different things and trialing things quickly, and then figuring out, actually, that one works for me, that one doesn't, whether it's technology or whether it's not. For me, technology is a tool to help you do the thing you need to do.
Yeah, and that's a great way of looking at that thing, isn't it? It is, like I said, it's a tool to to help. If I was to take you back then, when we were kind of, were you diagnosed, or is it self-diagnosed, or did you, what was that kind of process for yourself look like?
Yeah, so during lockdown, so I've worked in consultancy for 6 years, and my work life, I was working 50, 60 hours a week, working with clients, working in the consultancy itself, etc., etc. So my whole life was based around work. So all the support structures I needed and focus was given to me by the environment that I was in. And then lockdown hit. Was it the 12th or 13th of March, whatever year it was? You go home, you might come back to the office, and I'm sat in a living room going, there's nobody around. It's just me and my thoughts. This has never happened before, because I've always surrounded
Which
myself
means,
with people.
yeah.
Yeah. So I was looking at Instagram, and the more ADHD topics that came up on my Instagram feed, the more I was looking at it going, oh, this resonates, this resonates. Oh, RSD, so rejection sensitivity dysphoria, that immense feeling of sadness and feeling of rejection, whether it's perceived or actual in that moment, is a thing that I felt my entire life. And to be able to give it a label was then really helpful for me to go, oh, okay, what are ways that I can use to support myself in terms of, going back into my senses and feeling and thinking, is this real? Do I perceive it? Making sure I get back into my body. Because sometimes when I feel really stressed, I just sit there, and you can't see that I'm stressed, because I'm sat there fiddling with something, going, well, maybe you could, maybe I've got this idea that I don't look like I'm stressed, and maybe I'm just in my own world.
Or focused.
But getting out, yeah, getting out and moving my body was really helpful. But whistle stop tour, going back to diagnosis. So during lockdown, was on my own in my flat, thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. I just felt completely alone, and just, it was, as for a lot of people, it wasn't very nice. So looked at Instagram, and then thought, oh, maybe I should look at a diagnosis. Went to look at the NHS website. I think the wait list at that time was like 5 years, and I think it's something similar now. So found a private psychiatrist to diagnose me. And the process itself was, I was given some forms to fill out, gave a form to a friend, gave a form to my mum. And the process felt for me quite laborious, and it was lots of form filling. And I'm like, wow, this is quite stressful, isn't it? Looking back at like my old school reports, going, oh, if only she'd have just focused, if only she'd have just listened, she's really smart. I'm like, yeah, if only somebody knew. So then that's like kind of grief cycle of, oh, if somebody knew, if somebody could have supported me. But actually, if I did know, then would I be in the same position I'm in now? You don't know, do you? So went through that. Sorry, go.
No, please
Waffling
carry on.
now.
It's so fascinating. No, honestly, Georgina, I was just going to mention it is this kind of feeling, I guess, of what could have been, and how that would have played out differently, and have these kind of struggles that you've gone through, made you the person you are today. And I guess it is, and I think that you touched on the kind of the rejecting kind of where you feel you're rejected, and it could just be a comment, or it could just be a quick comment, or an email, or just something that's said, and that can live with you for a very long time. Sometimes years, but in that moment, and that's really tough. How have you kind of worked on that to be able to kind of not look back on some of these things, and use the terminology, beat yourself up, hypothetically, around.
Yeah.
Have you had time to do that?
Yeah, so I try to use these things to fuel me to support either myself or other people. It's kind of been like a fire in me going, nobody deserves to feel like a failure for being different. No one. Period. And the teacher that told me when I was 14 that I'd never do anything with my life, then has fueled me to doing something with my life and supporting other people so they don't have to hear words like that and go, oh, why, what? It's just, it's not, it's horrible to feel like that doesn't, like the world doesn't exist for you. And there's a really incredible ADHD coach called Ari Scott. So she is called the ADHD entrepreneur. If you don't follow her, absolutely check her out. Incredible, incredible human being. And she talks about how we're here to make a new world. Like the world isn't necessarily fit for us, but the world, you know, everything was created at some point, therefore there's always opportunity to make something different. So I don't know, a recipe to make bolognese, there's a specific recipe to make bolognese, but you could add something different and it may taste better to you, it may taste better to me if I add, I don't know, carrots into the, whatever the thing is. Like everything has an opportunity to be improved, whether that's myself or whether that's a process or a system or whatever that thing is. We always have the opportunity to make something better with the situation that we're in.
I completely agree, and I guess it's almost like you have to apologize. I've always felt throughout, kind of early in my career, my corporate career that I was in, and especially school and education, and sometimes social circles. In the past, you have to kind of apologize. You feel like you have to apologize
Yeah.
for not fitting into the norm or not understanding it in that way. And that over years can develop into a point of feeling not like worthless in that sense, or going into a new situation going, okay, overthinking it, thinking, okay, how do I decode this, how do I do it in this way? And it is those moments when you actually think, actually, what value can I add into this situation, how can I look at this differently? And I guess that's the narrative that we need to change.
Yeah.
you know
And also to support people through that feeling of, when there was some research done a few years ago around children with ADHD have 20,000 more negative messages towards them than a child that doesn't have ADHD. And if that's, part of your makeup that you've been told for years to be quiet, to settle down, that you're not this or you're not that, it takes quite a long time to unpick that. And there are people out there that can support you through that process because we are, as far as I'm concerned, we are here to make a new world. The world that we're in didn't exist 10, 15 years ago. I started my tech career, releasing software at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I didn't have to do that anymore. Like things have changed and things are changing for the better. And I think that the ability to support people through that process, to be able to create their own narrative and their own change dynamic is so powerful. So these conversations, so thanks for having me, Darren, I think are really part of making that change.
Yeah. Do you think there's much more awareness now? In the past kind of five years.
Yeah, interestingly, I think there's a lot more awareness for people. So,
Yeah.
as in me, with my understanding of my own ADHD, I think that awareness is a lot more than it used to be. And I think the next stage is for organizations to then understand it at a similar level, to then start to support their employees in a different way. Because not, you don't know what you don't know. I can't fly a plane as much as the idea that I'd like to fly a plane. It's a blind spot for me. So the empowerment of organizations to know and to understand that neurodiversity isn't a scary word. It's okay to be different. And the more we create psychological safety in our organizations, the easier it's going to be to support our staff. So I think it is changing. And I think the next evolution of this, understanding of neurodiversity, comes with the power of organizations understanding it to create those supportive systems for people.
I couldn't agree more. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I guess when you're in the sector and you're, and I mentioned this to our last guest that was on the last show. Sometimes I feel like I'm in a bubble, because whenever I go onto my social media channels and the people I connect with and the people I talk with, all I do is I talk about this kind of, this. And sometimes when I have to kind of, I step out of the bubble, as I say, into kind of the world, and the conversations aren't, as fluent, I guess, or the understanding isn't there. Because I always think to myself, oh, people know, years ago I thinking, oh, if I know, people know, this is common knowledge. but it really isn't. It is just scratching the surface. If we're looking at big organizations that are doing, this much, when really we should be getting to this kind of scale of this much.
Yeah. And I think also from an organizational point of view, it is, one, it's the right thing to do to support your employees, but also it makes financial sense to support your employees. If you've got high turnover and you've also got tribunals happening now because people understand they understand themselves more, and they're going, oh, actually, this doesn't quite fit. As organizations, or as leaders, we have a duty of care to the people that we work with to support them. And the more supported someone feels, the easier it is for them to then fit into that organization and to continue to create incredible things, because we're starting to embrace that differences is okay.
Absolutely. And I guess what we want to do in hindsight really is not have a reactive organization that has to go down the route of an individual feeling that they weren't supportive, go to the tribunal, and then it's a case of, oh, we actually need to protect our staff, but we need to protect the company. And to get to that stage, that that individual has to go, or individuals, because for one tribunal in an organization, I can imagine, is because one person's spoken up. It's probably the other 6, 7, however many people that haven't. So that's we only hear of the 1 or 2 cases, but it's as we mentioned, 1 in 7. It could be, the number could be massive.
And also if you leave a company feeling dejected and you're in a position of vulnerability, you're probably not going to continue the path of like, what do I need to do? So the self-discovery piece and that support to a person that feels like that, one shouldn't need to happen. But if it does need to happen, for people to know that support is there.
And I guess if we talking the corporate sector, and there are some organizations out there doing some incredible stuff, and others are kind of still on the journey, within this. But if we were to take an organization, what do you think the first kind of, and this is again, I'm not going to quote on this, but what do you think the first steps that they need to start implementing within their organizations to just kind of help themselves to understand more?
I think the first step is an awareness piece. So how psychologically safe do people in our organization feel? So how safe does somebody feel to be able to express what they need? How safe does someone feel to show up as themselves? Like, it's really hard to show up as yourself if you're different. And also, I've worked in organizations where I have been my true self and then have felt completely rubbish about myself in that space, and then like, that person doesn't deserve all of me. So I think the first step is an awareness piece, but also not just a survey. Like we can use surveys and then go, we've got all this data points, but if people don't feel psychologically safe, they don't feel safe to express what they really feel, then they're not going to answer the survey correctly. So whilst it's one data point, I think there needs to be some conversations had within teams and also on a one-on-one basis. So some research needs to go into play, and also have an idea of like, what does good look like in your organization? I don't know, how innovative are we? What are we doing right now from a product point of view, for example, that actually diversity of thought could help with? And then on the other side of that, how many people have been off sick this year? How many? And also, there's so many data points that you can take on. But I think the starting point is going, what do I want to do here as an organization? Why should I support people? One, because it's the right thing to do, but also it commercially makes sense to your bottom line if you're supporting people to stay in your organization because they want to be there. If one person leaves, it's 10% of their salary to re-recruit that person, let alone all of the knowledge that you've lost and the time it takes to retrain that person, etc. So the money that companies spend on training themselves, the benefit is huge.
Absolutely. I'm nodding vigorously. You're absolutely right. And I've always said, when I've spoken to organizations and I continue to do it, I said, it starts with the recruitment process of how do you encourage people to join your organization, and I think it's sometimes when I look at the recruitment side of it, I think of it, the job market now from the technology point of view is, we have, the LinkedIn thing now where you can have the easy apply and the Indeed and all the other different sites. And it just seems like a barrage. Speaking to, clients and other things, like a barrage of, we found 30 jobs that you can apply for. And then suddenly they just hit that button, all of these. So it does seem like this big kind of this process. But I think it should be a two-way thing when we're looking at the recruitment side of it, because yes, when we're out of work, it's very difficult and very challenging and very emotional. There's so many different things, financially, physically, mentally, all the other things that the kind of the emotion go through. And we're kind of led down the path of, it gets to a stage where the confidence gets knocked, and then you're actually, I'll just take any job. And then it's a case of you're into an organization. But what would be amazing is we had these organizations that list, that you actually feel attracted to, in the sense that you want to go there because you feel supported. Otherwise, this pain that you're going through now, you then join the organization, you then put it a cost to you from, time and emotion. You go through the company structure, the introduction, everything else. And like you said, the support's not there, and they start the cycle again.
Yeah, there's an incredible startup called Inclusive Jobs, so check them out. They are looking also to change this. So they're looking to create that community for neurodiverse individuals that, like you said, are in that position of, I need a job and I need some support through that process, but also matching them with companies who are neuro-inclusive, and also supporting organizations from a training point of view to become those neuro-inclusive supportive organizations. So kind of tackling it from both sides. And I think it's super, super important to be able to support both sides of this. This is the network effect, especially if you've got X amount of people that are out of work and feeling like that dejected feeling, to support them through that process. But also when they go to an organization, to know that organization is going to support them. Because if you're already feeling knocked back and then you go into an organization that says they're inclusive, and you go in and you walk in the front door and you're like, what have I done? We don't want that. We need to stop that before it happens, and that's what Inclusive Jobs are changing.
Do you think do you think also as well, sometimes there is and this is it's a difficult balance, because we have to, as we mentioned before, changing the narrative in sense of not leading with the negative, as in, I can't do that because of this, I struggle with this. So we change the narrative. And sometimes with the way that the marketing goes in certain organizations and stuff is, you could be the next Richard Branson, or you can this. And I'm not saying you can. I'm not saying, no one, if you set the right goals and everything else, you can. But do you find that sometimes that there is if someone was joining an organization and they said, oh, this person, I've read his profile, he's got dyslexia, he's got ADHD, he's done this, he's going to be amazing. Do you feel that sometimes there could be this expectation put on this individual before they even start, because they have dyslexia?
Yeah, like, I don't know, you've got this superpower narrative kind of thing.
So that was literally what I was trying to say.
Yeah, so I've got my ADHD cape on and my pants over my trousers, and I'm going to superhuman, superwoman through this. Yeah, I think so. And I think it's really interesting, because whilst people who are neurodiverse or have a condition for ADHD, for example, it means I can do lots of things, but also it does mean that I struggle with other things. So I think the superpower narrative, I think, can be really damaging, whilst it can also be made with the right intentions of people saying, this is a really good thing. Yes, but I also struggle with a whole bunch of other stuff. So it can come at a cost to myself. And I guess the more I understand myself, and the more I understand what comes at a cost to me. Like, this is an incredible conversation, but when I get off this call, I'm going to go and lie down for a bit without any kind of sound, because I need to decompress, and that's absolutely fine. And I know that I need to do that, and being able to give myself that space to do that, I think, is super important. And I think the more we have these conversations to help people understand that there are challenges as well as strengths, which everybody has strengths and challenges, and some can be more pronounced than others. But the superpower narrative on its own can be really dangerous as part of a toolkit of stuff. Really, really helpful, as in with anything, like, I don't know, square peg, round hole. You're not going to use a sledgehammer to open a window, whatever the whatever the phrase is, all of these things are useful in some way. So to understand that there is a superpower narrative and it can be powerful, but it also can be really hard to get your head around.
Absolutely beautifully put. I completely agree, and it is about understanding yourself, and I guess working with clients and looking at their and organizations and looking at their job spec. I'm always, I don't know if it's changed over the years, but they just seem massive now, and it's almost like they're looking for, I don't know. Sometimes it's almost. What a person has to have, their ability to have to apply for certain roles, you have to be either an all-rounder or something. Do you think sometimes an organization takes, and again, this is just hypothetical in that sense, but do you think an organization goes, okay, so we need an accountant, for instance? I'm just saying that this is all the roles that we think an accountant would need, and then it's actually, but we also want them to do this and this and this and this and this. And I don't know if you've seen the some of the ads now on job markets and stuff like that. Have you seen how some of the expectations that they want for you to apply? I if I was in the job market now, I would be really concerned about trying to fit all those remits.
Yeah, and I have only ever applied for one job where I felt like I've met some of the criteria. So there's been some studies around male and females applying for jobs and also other intersectionalities, but specifically my own experience, there's only ever been one job where I've applied for where I haven't met all the criteria. Any other job I've looked at and I'm like, there's, I don't know, 50 things and I've got to have done all of them before I even get to the point of applying. There's been a whole bunch of research that men specifically will go, yeah, I can do most of that. The only time I've ever done that is when I went from working in a call center to working in the tech team of that call center because I knew the operating system. I didn't know the other bits, but I was like, oh, I can do that. And that's the only time. And I was like 19. So for the rest of my life, I've gone, oh no, I'm really nervous because I can't do all of the things. And also, if that list is getting longer, it's probably even more detrimental to people to go, there's 50 things now where there only used to be 10. And I think the conversation around what the company actually needs from that role, do you need an accountant or do you need a manager of accountant, whatever, like what do you actually need? What's the goals of that role? And then the criteria of what that role could include comes differently. So there's kind of like I don't know, I think hard skills can be taught. You can teach me to use a spreadsheet. You can teach me to use StreamYard. So if there's like a core set of things that you need to be an accountant, as an example, if you can fulfill those things, and then here are all the other bits that we can cherry pick, and then let's have a conversation about it to see if you fit our organization and also we fit you. Because a lot of interview processes are like, I don't know, you go through 5 different stages and then they forget to respond to you at the end. The kind of that communication piece of fast iterative feedback that we were talking about earlier with the language piece, figure it out as quickly as possible to go, is this a right match for us?
Yeah. And it's those psychometric tests and things as well. I was speaking to, we were with an organization for many years around raising awareness in there and training. And they were saying within this industry, it was actually within the banking industry, that they lost so many people throughout the stages because there were I think it was like 6 or 7 different interview processes where they would judge you on the psychometric test, the other parts as well. And it's interesting, isn't it, that how much talent you lose and they drop off because of the test that's formulated around that, just to apply to work there.
Yeah, and I think it's also really interesting with like entry level roles. When if you look at some of these job specs, you need 5 years of experience for an entry level role, and you're like, that doesn't add up because 5 and 1 are not the same thing. Like 1 and 1, yes, 5, it's not the same thing. So I think organizations to understand what do they need from a role, what do they need from a person. Is there a potential to, I don't know, have a chat with 10 people and go, oh, maybe that would work. So it would mean like flipping an interview process completely on its head, like a 52 card pickup, and going, oh, actually, which bits actually work? Just because we've always done it a certain way doesn't mean it needs to be like that.
it's that's really interesting, and I guess I remember years ago the key was to make sure that you have a couple of questions at the end. When I was in corporate and I was regional director and I was interviewing people, it was always these kind of criteria of if they ask a couple of questions at the end, that it shows that they're interested in the organization. And I'm thinking, why don't we flip it and ask the questions at the start or through the process? And I guess it is finding that balance, isn't it? Because we are in a situation, it does seem with the job market that there's a plethora of jobs, and a real huge amount of people that are applying for these or not applying. I'm not in the job market, so I don't know, but it's definitely an industry I think that's people are working hard at and they're doing some amazing stuff at, but it's still, I see it all the time. It's a tough industry to break.
Yeah, and I think it's also a massive opportunity for companies to do interviews differently. To be able to say, oh, we're a neuro-inclusive employer, for example, and what we do is we've got these 3 different ways. Because, for example, I don't know, if you gave me 10 different ways to do an interview, I'd be like, oh my goodness me, 10 is a lot. I interviewed for a consultancy a little while ago, and they gave me 3 options. I think one was a bunch of questions. One was talk to us about a situation that you've been in before that maps to our values, or the same thing but a hypothetical situation, so like a role play. And I was, out of the 3 options, I was at the middle one. I can talk about something I've done before and I really believe in your values, therefore I can create something around that. So I spent, I don't know, half an hour talking about how I map to this company's values, and these are the 5 things that I'd done in this specific situation. And the interviewers were also incredibly helpful in asking me questions, so I didn't feel nervous. And also, I've been working in tech for over 10 years now, so I'm a lot more confident in being able to speak about my experience. But if you'd have asked me this a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, 4, whatever, I applied for a job where I'd spent 5, 6 days answering what I thought were the interview questions. And I wrote all this stuff out, and then I had the interview, and I didn't know any of the answers to the questions because I'd written everything out that I thought it was going to be, and it just wasn't anything that they asked. And then I was like, I didn't remember anything, and I was so nervous, and I left that interview thinking that was a waste of time for me and for them. And also, I think the interesting thing around that is about expectation settings for both parties. Like, this is the type of interview it's going to be. Here are the types of interview questions. This is how it's going to be set up, and then the person's got time to have a bit of preparation, so they go into it without having to waste the interviewer's time or the interviewee's time, and it becomes a conversation.
Absolutely.
Is this a right match? Is this a fit?
I couldn't agree more. You have, it's costly on both sides, and like you said, the recruitment process is costly. From the advertisement, for the interview, for the process, the time you spend on it, bringing someone in, the onboarding. If they're successful, it is really, it's something that I hope from having these conversations and the incredible work that people are doing, it continues. Georgina, can we go to tech? Where's your love? Have you always had a love for tech? Where did that start
from? Not really. So I think I touched on this earlier. So I used to work in a call center for Flybe. So they were a regional UK airline. They don't exist anymore, sadly. They're an amazing company to work for. So I started working with them when I was 17, straight out of college. Thought I was going to flunk my first year of college. So I got a job immediately, spent a summer working there. Then I got some grades and then ended up doing like a part-time job in the call center. Traveled, went to India for 3 months to teach English as a foreign language. And I came back and I thought, I've really enjoyed this. I'm either going to work in this call center for, I don't know, a few more months, a few more years, earn some money and travel the world. And then a job came up on a corkboard, like a real old school A4 piece of paper with, these are the things that we need from a test analyst. So a test analyst, so you've got developers that write code that make websites, and then you have testers that look at that website after a change has been made and say, has anything, does that change work? And also, is there anything, does anything need to be changed after it? I don't know, if a button no longer works because of an implementation. So this is the first job I ever applied for that I thought I can do most of that. So I did. and I was seconded into this test analyst role, and I had a whale of a time. Like, I was looking in databases, trying to understand the best profile fits of a customer, and we were adding like bags to bookings. So I had the best time. And then I was promoted at 21 to manage a team of test analysts, and we'd all come from, all of the test analysts had come from the call center, so we'd all worked in a very similar area beforehand, and everybody was older than me, much older than me. And so I'd been promoted to my level of incompetence. I was 21. I don't think I could cook my own food then. My mum used to wash my clothes. I didn't know anything at 21, and I'm there managing a team going, oh, crikey, this is hard, isn't it? So learning on the job was a definite thing there, and the resilience of me going, I can do this. So I did it for a year and went to this space in Exeter, which is in the southwest of the UK. I'm in an aircraft hangar looking at people, fixing planes. Oh, I love planes. And then I was thinking, can I do this anywhere else? Where better than to go to London? London, is a big metropolis. Why don't I go there? So I got a job, worked for Rightmove for 4 years, I think. Absolutely loved it. Again, had a whale of a time. Spent my 20s in London working in various different jobs. So it's not necessarily the technology piece that I like, it's the people bit. So being able to support people to create incredible things. So whether that's, I've done project management roles, I've done basically creating psychologically safe spaces so people can do the things they need to do. So whether that's speaking to senior managers around what's actually possible, and also speaking to engineers to understand if it is actually possible. So we're not mis-selling something as a development team. We're either making compromises or understanding each other to be able to create the thing that you actually want. Because I don't know, if I asked you to build me a house and you went, okay, and you built me a house, and then we're like, wow, what kind of house is that, Darren? Like, I don't know. There's a kitchen, a living room, a bedroom, but I don't know, we've forgotten the bathroom. I'm like, but I wanted a bathroom, and you're like, well, you didn't ask for a bathroom, Gina, so I did what you asked for. You asked for a house.
Yeah.
And so that role in between of understanding actually what someone wants, and it's not always what they say they want. That Henry Ford that said, if I ask people what kind of car they want, they'd ask me for a faster horse. So there's also that kind of thing of like, that this is the art of the possible, and this can happen, and we can make these kind of changes. So that interesting tightrope of people and technology is one I've walked for many years.
It sounds absolutely fascinating. It sounds like you've had a real, an incredible time collaborating with people while learning, your craft. So, so to speak. Do you think technology is changed a considerable amount in the work that you do?
Yeah, massively. So when I first started in technology, I don't think the iPhone might have just existed. I think. So the first job I had in tech was enabling people to add bags to flight bookings. We're now in a position where, there's more data that exists in the world than number of people. Like, we can do anything with technology. AI definitely didn't exist when I started, in the same way as it does now. I think it's massively changed, and whilst it's an enabler for a lot of things, we've also, attention is currency now.
Yeah.
So I think also from an ADHD point of view, understanding that I don't need to be in a technical world all the time, because where I feel safest and where I feel happiest is walking in a field with no shoes on. And so the more I push my brain into technology or doom scroll on Instagram, the more detrimental it is to me. So the more I can spend, the more time I can carve out for myself doing the things I really like doing, have also really helped me to accept myself more than I ever have done. So yeah, I think technology has changed. I think the way we communicate with each other has absolutely changed, because 10 years ago we wouldn't be able to have this conversation in this way with the wonderful people that are here with us today from all over the world. This wasn't possible in the same way. So technology is incredible for bringing people together, whilst I think being aware of what we don't want from it. Like, I don't want to be on my laptop all the time, for example, so I probably should shut it every so often.
No, I completely and I love the the analogy that you put the fact that I'd love to just walk on in a field with my shoes off and and just kind of I guess be one with nature, but kind of that break. And I guess there is we have to have this. It's really difficult because I've always been in kind of like, if I've not been self-employed, the job I've had before has always been, marketing, has always been promoting. So I've always felt like I have to keep this presence up of,
Yeah.
continuously having to work with tech. I love tech. I love, working on it. I love, designing, everything else like this. But it does come a point when I actually feel like you just feel like you just want to kind of put airplane mode onto
Yeah,
tech
yeah,
for a
yeah,
short while and just take a kind of break from it.
yeah. Oh, making me think of an idea. I'd love to be at a point where I could run an ADHD retreat that didn't require any kind of technology for a whole weekend, where we found ourselves at one with nature, understanding that we're perfect just exactly as we are. That sounds like a great idea.
No, it does. I literally I do my very best to kind of for me with my dyslexia and my ADHD. For me, I get to a point where the screen starts moving. It gets I know everyone's is different. For me, and I've been there in the past before. Nearly an hour trying to respond to an email with just just a couple of paragraphs, and it gets to a point when I learned these kind of little coping mechanisms where I actually think it's okay. I know it's important to get these things out, but I do literally shut the laptop, go for a walk,
Yeah.
take the dogs for a walk, put my phone on, leave it on the side or airplane mode, and just walk around the village. And I found that really helps. What do you diarize anything? Do you jot stuff down, with a pen or a pencil, or is it always?
Yeah, so I love Muji pens. Muji pens for me are my fidget toy. They're my writing equipment. I got a Remarkable 2 a little while ago, so an electronic notebook. So I use that to be able to write notes for meetings. But if I need to scribble something down, I I don't normally go back to it. So every so often I journal, and I go through phases of journaling. Um, so yes, every so often, but I find just writing things when I'm speaking to people is actually really helpful to help me concentrate. So if I'm playing with a pen, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm not listening. It means I'm actually listening more, because I'm kind of I'm keeping my body moving, because I can't jump around when I'm on the call or when I'm on the phone to you, because it's really difficult for me to then focus, and also for people to focus on what we're saying, because I'm jumbling around everywhere. So pen and paper when I'm in a meeting, journaling every so often. One thing I do find is that I'm trying the 30-day of yoga with Adrienne. So I'm trying to practice yoga every morning. It's between 20 and 30 minutes to create that space for me, before I touch my phone.
Yeah.
That's what I've been. So I'm on day 4 of 30. So check in 26 days.
But it,
But
it,
to
it
have that 20 or 30 minutes before I even touch my phone,
yeah.
to try and break that habit of like morning phone time.
It literally is. I put my my phone. I know a lot of people can't do this, but I put my phone on airplane mode after a certain time, and then it's on there throughout the night. And then in the morning, I do I'll get up, speak, have a coffee with my wife and all these different things, and then I will look at the phone, because what I've learned is that I always think to myself, when you go onto the phone, it's reactive. So the first thing I do when I grab the phone in the morning, it's a reactive thing. So I'm reacting to everything, so messages that come through the night, emails, all the different things, and then I can just be consumed. And mentally, for me, I think to myself, if I put myself in that mind frame of, oh yeah, I've got to do that, or I've got to do this, or that's come through, or
Mhm.
this and this, it doesn't set me up. So I try and diarize as much as I can. Practice gratitude lists and everything else. And I
Yeah.
feel that if I'm mentally strong enough to then go into the reactive stage of firefighting or creative or whatever it is, I find that
Yeah.
that's really helped. I'm not saying that happens every single time. I'm not perfect in this, but everything's a work in process. But it is just
Mhm.
trying to find these different things where you're not just doom scrolling and you know
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
I
And also
find
every so often, like, for me, I think doom scroll is okay, like
yeah,
every so often. But to
yeah,
again, these things are tools in a toolkit to enable me to live a life that I want. And one of those things is to, I don't know, practice yoga in the morning or make sure I go for a walk before. And that, for me, they're quite small things actually that make me really happy. I don't need to be a superstar DJ to be happy. I really don't. I did during lockdown though, buy a DJ keyboard, and I never opened it. So I'm not destined to be a
You're not,
superstar DJ.
you're not doing Glastonbury or anything. No.
No. I can't imagine going to a festival like Glastonbury. It's way too many people. It's way
Yeah,
too busy.
that does.
No, not for me. I watch it on TV.
Yeah.
Love music, love festivals. I quite like intimate dance festivals. They make me really happy, especially ones with loads of lights. Daytime and lights for me. But
I like we've got the Western Arboretum, which is a beautiful place, and every year then summer bands come over and you just basically sit on the grass and listen to the music, and it's
nice.
you just have kind of a picnic and a glass of wine and stuff, and it's but you've got that space. I always look at these things and I think, oh my goodness, you imagine being right at the front, just everyone just banging into you.
No, absolutely not. No. And I think also that comes with understanding what works for you, because a few years ago, if someone asked me to go to Glastonbury, and I know it's an absolute outrageous process to get a ticket, but if 5 years ago, if someone said, do you want to go to Glastonbury? I would have said yes. Now I'd say, you have the best time, because it doesn't work for me. Maybe a smaller thing, or, sitting on a hill watching Glastonbury, I'm in. But doing the things that work for me to make me not feel like that pang of anxiety that I'm in a space that makes me feel really uncomfortable, I try not to do those things anymore.
And that's the wonderful thing, that you've started, you worked on yourself and what works for you. And I think that's a very honorable thing to be able to do, to say, actually, if I do this and I put myself into this situation, what's that going to be like? How am I going to be able to recover from this? In the sense of, as you mentioned, after this call, you're going to just, switch off and just, kind of, relax in that sense. And I guess, when you take it to that kind of level, like Glastonbury or something else like this, it's trying not to put yourself in these situations, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think it's also a real privilege for us to be able to have this conversation. It's a real privilege for me to be able to say, after this call, I'm going to lie down for half an hour. Not everybody has that opportunity. And what I want Kind 2 to be is a space where anybody can get support. Anybody. It's not something Access to Work can pay for ADHD coaching, for example. So it's a government fund that can pay for ADHD coaching. So you don't need to pay for it, and you can still get the support that you need. It is there, it is available, and you don't have to necessarily pay for these things, because it is a privilege to be able to pay for support, and it shouldn't be like that. And I want Kind 2, and Kind 2 is a space where it does not have to be like that.
Absolutely. Georgina, we are coming up to the end of time. That as you're thinking, oh my goodness,
so quickly.
Yeah, we've speaking for nearly an hour. So I cannot thank you enough for your time. Georgina, if people wanted to connect with yourself, how would they do that? And obviously I would put your details on there, but how would they get in touch with you?
Cool. Feel free to drop me a LinkedIn message. So my name is Georgina Shute. I think you can see it on the screen. So LinkedIn's probably the best way of contacting me.
Thank you so much, Georgina, for your time, your expertise, your knowledge, the conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and as I mentioned I literally wake up like a sponge, just wanting to absorb some knowledge, and you've given me that today. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope you have a nice day, folks.
You too. Take care. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks, Georgina.
Bye.